Hi everyone and welcome to the Sports Countdown podcast with Declan Hughes and Peter Lynch. Just before we get started, a quick shout out to Freelance Football Ops who share paid freelance football jobs and they can be found on LinkedIn and Twitter. This week we will be joined by NFL draft analyst Ryan Roberts, who will be joining us for his second appearance on the podcast.
Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. 2021 NFL Draft took place last week, Thursday through Saturday. So much to discuss, of course, and we'll get into that very shortly. But thanks so much for joining.
Absolutely, guys. I appreciate you guys having me back on. It's a little less hectic now that the draft's finally over, but appreciate you guys having me on to talk about it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So firstly, I think I'd just actually like to touch on the event itself. You know, it took place in Cleveland, packed with people. 1 year on from the commissioner announcing the picks last year in his basement, I think. So yeah, of course there's still a long way to go until we're back to normal. But you know how good was that to see things gradually improving, and how excited are you?
I mean, it was phenomenal. It was paramount, to be honest, because the 2020 cycle, even just based besides it being a fully virtual event at the draft, we were dealing with pro day cancellations and players not being able to get their verified measurables and trying to figure out, the team building side of everything, because some guys just didn't get the opportunity necessary because teams just didn't have enough information on them. So going into this year, there were still some tough parts. There were some cancellations during the season and some levels of football that didn't even play, and some conferences that had to go through a lot of turmoil. And then in the draft process, they didn't have a regular combine like they usually do. They didn't have the NFLPA Bowl. It was a fully virtual event. They didn't have the East-West Shrine Game. It was fully virtual. So it wasn't perfect, but it was nice to just be able to see those moments on camera, specifically about the event where, these guys have been working their entire life to get this dream, and to get this reality, and then to set their family up long-term. This is generational type of money and type of opportunity that they get that they're going to get here very soon. So it was nice just to see the interactions between the commissioner and the guys that were in there and with their families on TV. And it last year just felt a little disjointed. This year felt like it was kind of, it was back to as much normal as possible. And hopefully next year we're back to the full complete draft cycle that we've been used to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of bear hugs from the commissioner again. I'm sure that's what he missed.
Yes. I mean, it's the best part, man. It's like the 320-pound offensive tackle that just lift him up off his feet, and just bear hug. It's the best part.
Very good. Anyway, Ryan, so we'll just talk a little bit about the first round. So how did you feel the first round went? Was there any surprise picks in there, or maybe some picks that you didn't expect a certain team to take? What was your thoughts on it?
I thought it was pretty normal, especially the first 10 picks or so. I think what went very odd was I thought there was going to be a little more trades early on, and then the first trade that we really got during the draft was the Philadelphia Eagles trading up from 12 to 10 with the Dallas Cowboys, which is very odd. You don't usually see division teams trading with each other. So obviously the Eagles jumped up in front of the Giants to take Devonta Smith from them, and then it was got back to normal a little bit, and then Alex Leatherwood comes off the board with the 17th overall pick to Las Vegas Raiders, which is just kind of a head scratcher. And then into the 20s, there were some picks, like Joe Tryon was the 32nd pick to Tampa Bay. That was a little odd. 28th overall pick. The New Orleans Saints took the defensive end from Houston, Peyton Turner. It was just kind of like a out of left field. So it wasn't the craziest first round ever. But it's true of every season, though. Every NFL draft, there's going to be just some picks where you're just like, huh? Like, I did not have that guy nearly ranked to that degree, or I had that guy ranked way higher that went a lot lower. So it was a pretty much normal first round. There just always is a couple teams, especially like the Las Vegas Raiders, that just they kind of walk to the beat of their own drum a little bit. They don't draft traditionally, kind of like the Seattle Seahawks, but of course they didn't have a pick this year. So there's always those teams that kind of throw you in a little wrench into what is perceived normal. But for the most part, I think it was a pretty normal first round.
Yeah. So obviously we know there was a lot of quarterback talent in the first round that went. But out of all the players that went in the first round, who do you think's got the best chance of having a successful career in the NFL? You can give a couple if you think.
Yeah, no, it's I think it's a close conversation. The one guy that I think is like foolproof. Well, I don't want to say foolproof because nothing's foolproof, but quarterbacks are a little harder to predict sometimes because they're kind of they're dictated by the situation that's around them. There's a lot of moving parts, but I think a guy like Kyle Pitts that went fourth overall, the tight end to the Atlanta Falcons, for me, it's just like he's 6'5" plus, he's 245 pounds, he's a super athletic kid. He is going to be a headache for guys to cover, whether it's a cornerback, safety, linebacker. I think he's a mismatch weapon. And then the other guy that I would probably throw in there early on is Penei Sewell, that actually went to the 7th overall pick to the Detroit Lions. He was overthought a lot this draft process, to be honest. He opted out of the 2020 season, and some people just had their questions because the last time they saw him, he was only 18 or 19 years old. So it's like projecting forward for a guy that you haven't seen that recently, which makes some people uneasy. But for me, he's 6'5", 330, outstanding film in 2019. Like, he's going to be a left tackle, right tackle for the foreseeable future and potential Pro Bowler. So I would say Pitts and Sewell are probably the two guys that I would bet the most money on.
What about the quarterbacks? What do you think?
It's got to be Trevor Lawrence. I mean, Justin Fields and Trey Lance for me are pretty close in the fact of, like, if they're in the right situation, I think they have a chance to be special. But Trevor Lawrence, I mean, he's the best quarterback that I've ever evaluated. He's the best quarterback to come out in several years now. So I would be very surprised if he wasn't successful at the next level. And they have guys like DJ Chark and Marvin Jones in free agency and James Robinson. They drafted Travis Etienne. He's got a lot of weapons around him. And I think that the generational label that he's kind of gotten as the best quarterback to come out in some time, I think that he does deserve that honor.
Nice.
Interesting. A lot of insight there. You talk a lot about ranks there. I see a lot of, like, there's been a lot of media, panelists talking about ranking how players have, how they're going to do in the future and how teams have done in this actual draft. I would say your team, the LA Rams, I think I was just reading before we came on air, somebody ranked them second bottom in the whole thing for how they've done in the draft. I think the Seahawks were the only team below them. So yeah, they made the headlines just firstly for not having a first round pick. I think they had 9 selections though, so they've obviously tried to strengthen. But how would you evaluate this for the Rams?
Well, it's funny, the two teams that you mentioned at the bottom are both in the same division, the NFC West, and they both did not have a first round pick. And I mean, that does affect your ability to have a great draft to a degree, right? Like, you don't have that higher ranked player. Mm-hmm. The Rams, they had needs. They could have strengthened the offensive line. They could have strengthened the defensive line or the linebacker, defensive end. They could have went a lot of other routes, and then they decided in the second round to draft a 155-pound wide receiver. So I wasn't a big fan of the pick. And then the next couple picks, I'm just like, man, like I just didn't get it, because for me, the Rams offensive line is going to be a need moving forward over the next couple of years. And this was a really good offensive line class, both on the interior and at offensive tackle. And the Rams did not, like you said, they had 9 picks, but they did not draft an offensive lineman with any of those 9 picks. And they valued a wide receiver highest when they already have Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods and Van Jefferson. Like, it's not a position of need, at least that high for me. So I did not like what the Rams did. I didn't understand it. I think that it's completely deserving of being the second worst ranked draft overall, honestly, because I just feel like they targeted players that I just don't understand, and they left positions on the board that I feel like was very important for them to hit on. So it was a big head scratcher, to say the least.
Who do you think which few teams had a good draft, would you say?
Detroit Lions, I thought, was a fantastic fit. We talked about Penei Sewell already, going 7th overall. They got Penei Sewell. They drafted Levi Onwuzurike, the defensive tackle, in the second round. They drafted Aleem McNeil. I thought it was a fantastic draft, because what the problem with the Lions is, over the next couple years, Lions are going to be a really bad football team, because Matt Patricia and that staff left them in bad situation, to say the least. So Brad Holmes and Coach Matt Campbell came in, and I think that they started the rebuild from the inside out. Offensive line, defensive line, which is the most important spots outside of quarterback to strengthen and to build around. So Detroit Lions did really well. And then this is a weird one, but not usually the case, but I thought the New York Giants did a fantastic job, to be honest. They moved back and, they got some draft capital. And the funny part is, like, Dave Gettleman, general manager for the New York Giants, he has never traded back, like, in his career. It's kind of a running joke at this point. He finally does it. And I think they did a fantastic job, and I really was a big fan of moving back again from 12 to 20 to get Kadarius Toney, second round to get Azeez Ojulari, the outside linebacker from Georgia. For me, they got a ton of value. They got extra draft picks. I think that the New York Giants, for once, because, historically, I haven't been a big fan of some of their drafts, but I think them and the Detroit Lions did some really good stuff for this draft cycle.
What about my Philadelphia Eagles? How do you think they did?
Such a front runner, Declan. All right. The Eagles, I will say the first pick, they traded up from 12 to 10 to get Devonta Smith. I thought it was a great maneuver. I thought it was a great pick. It's what they need. Like, they just need wide receivers. So I like the pick there. The second round was a little odd, second and third rounds, because they took Landon Dickerson with their 37th pick, who is a very good player, very good offensive lineman, center, probably the guy that's going to replace Jason Kelsey in a year or two. But the problem with him is he literally ended the season on crutches 4 seasons in college. He, like, 4 season-ending leg injuries, two ACLs. He had some ankle injuries. Like, he's had a lot of durability concerns. And being a guy that's only like 22 years old, you worry about it moving forward, because it's like, if a guy's getting hurt at that age that often in college, that doesn't usually get any better. So yeah. I think that it's going to be a little tough moving forward for that one. And then they were at pick 70. They decided to trade back. They apparently wanted Aleem McNeil, who was drafted by the New York Giants. They traded back from 70 to 73, and McNeil was drafted right before they picked again, because they wanted to try to get a little more draft capital, another pick or so. But then they kind of got into a situation where there's a video going viral where one of their scouts was very pissed off, to say the least.
I did see that, yeah.
Yeah, and he was mad because I guess they really wanted Aleem McNeil, and then they missed out on him because they traded back because it seemed like they just wanted to get a little cute and get another draft pick. They ended up taking Milton Williams, who, like, all right, developmental potential maybe, but, like, he's not going to give you valuable reps, I don't think, early on at least. And he's coming from a smaller school, Louisiana Tech. Workout warrior, tested great. I don't know about that selection, but then the Eagles on the day 3 of the draft, which is rounds 4 through 7. They hit it out of the park, to be honest. Like Kenny Gainwell, Jacoby Stevens, a lot of great value picks. So I really liked the first rounds, and then the rounds 4 through 7. It was just the second and third round that was just a little odd to me for how the Eagles attacked it.
Landon Dickerson just seems like the perfect pick for us, just because he's injury prone, and we know how bad the Eagles have been for years now, since we just love players on the medical bench or something sitting at the side. So that made sense to me in that terms.
He's going to fit right in, Declan.
He's going to fit right in.
He's going to have a spot in the cold tub. The trainers are going to be busy. They'll be good, man. Yeah, he'll fit right in.
Absolutely.
It sounded exactly like me and you, Declan. Pretty young guys, but knee injuries and ankle injuries.
Do you know what I mean? We've got experience, man. We've both had horrible injuries from promising careers. Our PE teachers did say we could have made it, but...
Yeah, but, I hope they have better facilities in the NFL to deal with something like that.
Well, yeah,
you would hope so.
The Eagles have got a great medical team. That's why it takes us years to get people back in and playing again. Right. Anyway, top 3 countdown. We should probably mention, Pete, that we forgot to do it last week.
Yeah.
We were so unprepared. So this needs to be really good, because we missed it last week. People are really anticipating this.
No pressure.
For you, your top 3, we're going to say, from the second round in the draft onwards, who are some picks that you think we should look out for that are maybe like unexpected, but you think they might have an impact in the NFL?
Yeah, so I will go. The one that really surprised me was actually the Eagles. I think that this was a great pick in the 5th round. They got Kenny Gainwell, who's a running back out of Memphis. If there's any player that suffered most from being an opt-out player this year, for me, it's Kenny Gainwell, because I thought he was a 2nd to 3rd round prospect on film in 2019. But some teams are very honest in saying that they hesitated with a lot of these guys that opted out that didn't have film in 2020. So I think he fell definitely to that. The Eagles have Miles Sanders, who's a good running back already, but as you know, like we just mentioned, he's dealt with some injuries himself. So he's not a guy that has been counted on every single week. I think that Kenny Gainwell, both from a running perspective, and I mean, Memphis used him. They would put him out wide at wide receiver and throw him back shoulder fades. Like, he's a really talented football player that I think a lot of people forgot about. And I think coupled with Miles Sanders, that could be a fantastic fit. So that was number 3. And then for my 2 and 1, I went with 2 guys that both went in the second round, so I thought were for sure going to go in the first round. One guy was Tevin Jenkins from Oklahoma State, who got drafted by the Chicago Bears actually in the second round. Now, the Bears made that big trade up. They went up and they got Justin Fields, their quarterback, of course. In every mock draft, I didn't think that they were going to be in position to take a quarterback. So I gave them Tevin Jenkins in like every first round mock draft at pick 20. I gave them Tevin Jenkins, and then he winds up falling to the second round. And I think that is tremendous value because not only do you have your quarterback, you also now have your starting right tackle from day one. So I really do love that pick a lot. And then this last one was a tough one. I wanted to mention Azeez Ojulari, but I did earlier to the New York Giants, the pass rusher who fell to the second round, apparently with a knee injury. But the one guy I needed to mention, because Declan knows I'm a big Notre Dame guy, so let's talk about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the linebacker from Notre Dame, who, again, I was projecting 19th overall, maybe to the Washington football team. And apparently in their medical rechecks, there came back with something with he had a heart issue that they eventually did pass him, and they eventually did, teams eventually got comfortable with. But I guess the medicals came back so late this year that teams really hesitated on it because, you hear heart issue and you're like, oh, okay, that's a little terrifying, right? But Owusu-Koramoah falls to the second round. Cleveland Browns snatch him up with like this 52nd pick or something like that. And I think that is tremendous value because this was a guy that came in as a safety in Notre Dame, ends up playing Rover in their 4-2-5 defense, which is basically just a linebacker. And some people are hesitant because they're like, is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? He's kind of like the middleman in that regard. But I really think that in how the NFL is going with how much they value the passing game now, having a guy like him that can do a little bit of everything and do everything very well, I think that he's going to be a huge asset. And to be the 52nd pick for a guy that I thought might go top 20, I thought was tremendous value.
Yeah, I mean, since starting to watch Notre Dame, he was like player that you pointed out like right away, and he's a really good talent. So I agree with you there. Do you want to give your boy Ian Book a shout out before we cut out?
I do not want to give my boy Ian Book a shout out. The fact that Ian Book went in the 4th round is, I still can't believe it because I'm a fan of Notre Dame, and I feel like some people are so much higher on some Irish players than I am. And I mean, the kid, no disrespect to him, but the guy is 6 foot, doesn't have a great arm, is a good athlete, but like he's not an exceptional athlete. And there's just so many limitations. And of course, it's Sean Payton with the New Orleans Saints, who's known for developing quarterbacks and getting great quarterback play, is going to have Ian Book. So now people are going to say, oh, you were wrong about Ian Book. Well, let's wait a little bit because I'm still not buying into the Kool-Aid on Ian Book.
That's your QB1 right there for the Saints in the next few years.
Not a chance. Not a chance.
Well, I thought that was going to be another full-blown rant just after your Rams one, but it's justified because Declan's had plenty of rants over the weeks, and even I've had myself a rant or two, so it's definitely allowed.
Well, Pete, oh man. So I'll give the quick context of Ian Book. Okay, here's the full backstory. Ian Book was a Washington State commit that Notre Dame offered late. Notre Dame, he ends up going to Notre Dame. And for the first year, he is a redshirt, so he didn't play. Then he's behind this guy named Brandon Wimbush, who is like super athlete, can't really throw type of quarterback. It's super frustrating to watch because he misses so many easy throws. And of course, everybody's favorite player is always the backup quarterback. It's like when a quarterback does bad, it's like, oh, let's get the backup in. He can do better. Well, that was what Ian Book was for me and for a lot of Irish fans. So like, let's just see him play and see what he can do. And he ends up coming in and he does pretty well. like relatively well, better than a Brandon Wimbush, and the team starts playing better. The problem is he's just the same guy for the next 3 years. Like, he just is what he is, which is fine. He's a good, solid college quarterback. But of course, playing for a team like a Notre Dame that is, a highly publicized team and one of the blue bloods of college football, it's like a guy can't ever just be a solid starting quarterback for Notre Dame that maybe isn't an NFL guy. He always has to be overhyped, and he always has to be this gift from God. And that's just not what Ian Book is. Like, he's a good college quarterback who's probably not going to make it long in the NFL. But for whatever reason, the Saints decide 4th round pick, let's spend it on him and see what he's got. It just didn't make a ton of sense to me.
Wow. Interesting. Declan, you shouldn't have brought it up, to be fair.
No, sorry. I'm trying to get people triggered on this show now.
All right, yeah. Well, next time you guys have me on, we'll talk about only players that I despise in my lifetime, and then we'll get everyone super unhappy. All right.
Spot on.
Absolutely perfect. Now, honestly, it's absolutely super insight. Obviously, a really big event in NFL, so we really appreciate your time once again.
Yep, absolutely, guys. Appreciate you having me back on.
And Declan, thanks to you as always.
No worries, my man. It's a pleasure as always.
And, our listeners, thank you so much for all the support. We really, really appreciate it. Just keep listening, keep watching, and we will be back for more next week.